Our home is what's inside of it. Over time, we buy things we don't want to lose, but don't update our contents coverage. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Do you dread waiting in those long, inconvenient lines? That's why you won't find them at Bank Pacific. We're back to our pre-COVID Monday to Saturday hours with all of our branches open. You know, that where others put branches, we place roots thing. And if you don't want to come to the bank, we have MyCloud Banking through which you can go to the bank on any of your devices, including through our new cool mobile banking platform with remote capture so you can deposit checks from anywhere. Offline, online, no line. Bank Pacific. Where others put branches, we place roots, and we're rooting for you. Member FDIC.
U.S. intelligence says it is unlikely that any of the unexplained aerial phenomenon documented by U.S. military personnel in recent years are from another world, but they haven't completely ruled it out either.
White House officials who have been briefed on a much-anticipated government report about these aerial phenomena tell the New York Times the report rules out that any of the 120 incidents evaluated involve the U.S. military or advanced government technology. The report also expresses fears that China and Russia could be experimenting with hypersonic technology. An unclassified version of the report is expected to be released to Congress by June 25th.
Fox's Sean Lanchel, Minneapolis on edge. On the same day that city crews dismantled what had come to be known as George Floyd Square, there's been another fatal shooting by law enforcement. The U.S. Marshals Service says a task force trying to arrest a man on firearms warrants shot and killed him Thursday when they say he pulled a gun on them. A crowd later gathered outside a police station, hurled expletives at police, and set a dumpster on fire before dispersing. Longtime prominent defense attorney F. Lee Bailey has died.
He was one of those lawyers you could recognize by name alone. F. Lee Bailey was known throughout his legal career for taking on some of the highest profile cases and clients. In the 60s, he reversed Sam Shepard's conviction for killing his wife, a case that inspired the TV series The Fugitive. He counted heiress Patty Hearst among his clients. In 1995, he also became part of O.J. Simpson's legal team, helping to earn his criminal acquittal. Simpson on Twitter called Bailey one of the great lawyers of our time. After countless TV appearances and disbarments in 2 states, he went into legal consulting. Bailey died in Georgia at 87, a week before his birthday. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Busy week? Mezcla Bistro in Tumon has you covered. Let us take the worries out of your dinner meal planning. Check out our daily specials or enjoy some of your local favorites. Plus, receive a free kids meal with each adult dinner entree purchased Monday through Thursday. Call 969-2652 for more information or to make a reservation at the Grand Plaza Hotel in Tumon. And don't forget, Jack Larimer is live every Saturday night. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro, a true taste of Guam.
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Need to finish the job or start one the right way? Get the right stuff at East West Rental Center. You can switch to easy mode using industrial strength equipment. With years of experience helping builders, East West Rental gives you exactly what you need. Tools for landscaping, concrete, lifts, trucks, tables, tents, chairs, water blasters, excavators, forklifts, air compressors, and more. Call East West Rental Center at 646-1463 or visit them in Upper Tumon. Open Monday to Saturday from 7 to 5, Sundays 8 to 5.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, even on Friday, even though it's the last day of Tall Tales for 2 whole days. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So while we're not infringing on the right to bear arms, let's go straight to Zemi Ikotny. And here we go on the Pacific Daily News. Our view, Gov Guam must ensure equal treatment for those with disabilities. There would have been a time when I would have read that and thought, yeah, of course. But now whenever I see the word equal, it's like, look out, something bad is laying in the highway here. Be careful. So it says, if you have a disability and live on Guam, it's very likely that life is far from easy, even though the Americans with Disabilities Act prohibits discrimination and guarantees that people with disabilities have the same opportunities as everyone else to participate in the mainstream of American life, to enjoy employment opportunities, to purchase goods and services, to participate in state and local government programs and services, according to the U.S. Department of Justice. To begin with, the federal government continues to unfairly deny. How many times do we have to explain this? The federal government continues to unfairly deny the disabled on Guam supplemental security income. Yeah, that's, you could mention that kind of like it. And, oh, by the way, but it's the lead item here. Yeah.
We also deny people winter coats and scarves.
Yeah, and the opportunity to pay federal income tax to the IRS, which really sticks in a lot of people's craw, And this is what the editorial goes on to say. It's designed to help the aged and those with disabilities with little or no income meet basic needs for food, clothing, and shelter. It's not to help the aged. It's only to help the disabled. So once again, if you're going to write an editorial, have some idea what it is you're talking about. But even those living elsewhere lose the benefit if they move to Guam. The Department of Integrated Services for Individuals with Disabilities has said the private sector has problems complying with accessible parking and signage rules, and many businesses are unaware of the Americans with Disabilities Act requirement. The agency's Division of Support Services has only 6 members, only 3 of which are social workers, which translates into about 120, 130 cases each. The agency is seeking a budget that will allow attendance. The agency is seeking a budget that will allow for attendance, could assist individuals, nice sentence, with disabilities who may need help on an intermittent basis. Accessible housing is hard to find for those with disabilities. Even many first-floor units have steps that lead to the door. Public transportation remains an issue. Hours and routes are limited, and riders frequently endure long waits. There is a paratransit service, but there is a paratransit service, but must make reservations in advance. There are people writing editorials who are semi-literate. I wonder if DISIT has a program for them. This is what the sentence is trying to say. There is a paratransit service which requires reservations in advance, limiting the ability of those with disabilities to be as independent as possible. I don't quite get that either. Being independent means being able to call paratransit service at the last minute without making a reservation. This is independence.
Is there an amendment to get rid of the insular cases?
I'm surprised that there isn't. I mean, this is really 2 different editorials, 2 poorly developed editorials. One about supplemental security income, and the second about what we're doing here, what kind of a job we're doing here. And the two are not even closely similar. And try navigating Guam sidewalks. Many have huge concrete power poles in the middle because roadways were widened without adequate planning. Others lack slopes at intersections, making crossing difficult. The government of Guam clearly needs to improve its efforts to ensure and provide equal treatment and opportunity for those with disabilities. It must better ensure compliance with Americans with Disabilities Act and be more proactive in addressing gaps in needed services so that those with disabilities can lead more meaningful and independent lives. Yeah, well, you know, this is a great opportunity for virtue signaling. And it would have been a good opportunity to write an editorial instead of just kind of an agglomeration of loosely connected words. Try harder, PDN. Yeah. And then we get to the Post. I don't know, maybe because it's Friday or something like that. To the school communities. To the school communities, thank you for seeing our graduates through. Class of 2021 graduations, which have unfolded the past few weeks and will wrap up next week, culminate students' achievements all the way through high school or college. This milestone is for students. This milestone is for students. Boy, you gotta shut up here.
Your phone is hot today, Bob.
Shut up, phone. Yeah. And behind every student's graduation are the efforts of teachers who collectively, let's see here, where was I before my phone so rudely interrupted me? Behind every student's graduation are efforts of teachers who collectively made graduation day happen for the students. My heart's getting warmer my tummy's getting warmer all the time. I gotta turn my phone off. Some teachers became a positive, if not transformational, influence on students, even in years as early as kindergarten, elementary, and high school. They have provided the spark that inspires students to try and achieve even the loftiest of goals. This is an exercise to show you how you can put words on paper and fill up a page and not say anything at all. Some of our teachers became the second moms, if not the mom figure for students, when times at students' home. I can't go on with this. There are no words to thank them enough. To our teachers, coaches, school support staff, and principals, we can only begin by saying our heartfelt thank you. We only hope that as our new graduates see paths to college or careers, they will not forget those who remain on the campuses they left behind, preparing for yet another year and another batch of future graduates. Well, you filled the news hole, Daily Post.
Uh-oh!
Seemed appropriate.
I think it was, yeah. All right.
It's a lot of gas.
Yeah, that actually of the three things we entertained during that particular portion of time, that was the most enlightening, Tony. I mean, Jose, thank you very much for that. All right, here we go. Today's card. I'm going to wrap up Toy versus Midpack and Pato versus Sabina. I'm going to rule. I'm going to make my ruling. And then we've got Bavacqua versus the United States of America, the Daily Post versus Tony Diaz. And if you don't know who Tony Diaz is, he's a director of communications for the Archdiocese of Agana. He's supposed to be doing the communications for the Archdiocese. And you'll find out that that's why he's on the card today. We've got CLTC versus transparency. We got two transparency items in a row here. I've got Lebowski and Therese versus the doctors. It's still on the card. The right-wing, quote, conspiracy theory, close quote, versus left-wing, quote, truth, close quote. The District of Columbia versus Black Lives Matter. Chinese American Civil Rights Coalition versus Turley and Tall Tales. Okay, so picking up with Troy versus Midpack. Now, you know that this is a controversy dealing with the collection of taxes on cigarettes. And it turned out that several years ago, that a cigarette wholesaler, Midpack, did not pay $10.5 million in cigarette taxes. And this was somewhat scandalous. Midpack came forward and said, we broke it ourselves. We discovered it was an oversight. We went to Rev Tax. We fessed up. It was our mistake. We've entered into a payment arrangement, etc. After that, Michael St. Nicholas, who was in the legislature at the time, introduced a bill that became law that would require every pack of cigarettes to have a tax stamp on it. Something that, if you've ever seen a cigarette pack in the United States, in the mainland, you're very familiar with. Unfortunately, the Department of Revenue and Taxation never implemented the St. Nicholas law. Their excuse, I think they went through the regular, it's a personnel matter. Why didn't you implement, it's a personnel matter. And then we don't have the funding to do it. So then Tina Rose Munya Barnes introduced a bill in the 35th legislature that would privatize the program. That a private company would get the stamps, print them, etc., and put them on the cigarettes and collect a fee from the government for doing that. Then the next item was that Sabina Paris introduced Bill 104 to repeal the Tina Paris bill. And that was hotly contested. It failed. It didn't get enough votes to pass. And Pito Terlahi entered the fray after the bill failed, accusing not Senator Sabrina Paris, but Paris of favoring one of the tobacco wholesalers. And of course, we know which wholesaler it was. Sabina came on the floor after her bill failed with a soliloquy saying, I didn't do this to help out any tobacco wholesaler, etc. I did it. How else does senators explain it? I did it for the people. Yeah. And I have reserved on this. I have not ruled from the microphone. I've reserved on it. I wanted to think about it a little bit more. Spent a lot of time with this. And some of the points are, all of the tobacco wholesalers were against Paris's bill except one, and that was Midpack, the Calvo wholesaler. And so my analysis was this. If you think that Paris's bill was to help Calvo, Midpack, then the analysis had to be this. If Tina's bill stayed in place, sooner or later, Midpack would have to pay taxes on cigarettes. If Paris's bill passed, it would go back to the Department of Revenue and Taxation, and everybody knows they don't collect tobacco taxes. Therefore, MidPac was in favor of Paris's bill because they wanted to not pay their tobacco taxes. Without understanding who's doing what to whom, that seems like some pretty fuzzy thinking to me. To think that, you're better off with a situation because the a government department won't do its job and you won't have to pay the taxes. That seems to me like a long shot at best. Now, as part of the process leading up to the discussion of Rule 50, as you were Bill 104, there was a letter from MidPac to Senator Sabina Paris and her committee, and I have it in front of me. And he said, I'm writing to provide testimony on behalf of MidPac regarding Bill 104, which proposes to amend payment requirements for cigarette tag stamps. Respectfully, in regard to the legislative findings, and he talks about double delay. And there is a mistake about a double delay, et cetera, which is not relevant to the discussion we're having right now. So I'm not going to spend any time on it. Then he goes on to say, whereas cigarette wholesalers are required to pay cigarette taxes regardless of whether it sells its products and are paid by its consumers. When cigarettes are withdrawn from the wholesaler's bonded facility, the cigarette taxes on such products are due to the government by the 20th day following the month the product was withdrawn, regardless of whether the products are sold and payment received. Cigarette wholesalers have the burden of having to pay taxes on revenues it may never receive. This is especially difficult during these times, etc. So it's different from the gross receipts tax, because if you sell anything else, the tax is on your gross receipts. So if you're selling widgets, you don't pay tax on the widgets when you take them off the ship. You pay tax on the widgets the 20th day of the month after the month in which you sold the widgets. In case of the cigarette tax stamp, when tax stamps are purchased, it will take time to affix the stamp onto the pack of cigarettes before the products can legally be sold. This additional delay should be taken into account as it places a further financial burden on cigarette wholesalers, etc. To be clear, MidPac supports the legislative intent of the original tax stamp law, Public Law 34-55, which was the tax stamp law, of ensuring accountability and creating a level playing field so that non-compliant companies are not given an unfair advantage and are penalized. I think I would advise anyone who's testifying on anything to never use the term non-level the playing field anymore. Ms. Nelson so tainted that term with her testimony on the bill for set aside for government contracts for females that it's lost whatever punch it ever had.
If you want to get technical, the best playing fields are convex, not level. But that's if you want to get technical.
I suppose. Better drainage, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Drain the playing field, that's what I say.
Yeah. So MidPac supports Michael St. Nicholas's bill. The cigarette tax stamp requirements will additionally aid against the sale of prohibited export and foreign cigarettes in Guam. Enforcement by RevTax and the Office of the Attorney General is correspondingly important, especially since the proposed additional financial requirements on legitimate wholesalers will likely lead to the unlawful importation and sale of cigarettes with a resulting decrease in revenue for the Healthy Futures Fund. Okay, let me go on to the next important part here. As the Office of the Attorney General is responsible for enforcement of the Master Settlement Agreement, it stands in the best position to effectively enforce Guam's cigarette tax stamp requirements. Tobacco permit requirements and the comprehensive regulatory environment. This will allow the Office of Attorney General to identify and address any problems that Guam may have with contraband cigarette sales, etc. Bill 104-36 proposes that a 1% stamp fee be added to the price of the tax stamp. The tax stamp fee will be split 0.5% to the cigarette tax stamp fund, 0.5% to the Office of the Attorney General. Despite criticism of past practices, direct tax, as you were rev tax, is and has been doing a good job in collecting cigarette taxes. For instance, it's estimated that over $38 million will be contributed to the Healthy Futures Fund in 2020. Nevertheless, if the legislature feels the need to bolster the staffing of rev tax and OOG to further implement and enforce tax stamp laws, I respectfully submit that a small allocation from existing cigarette tax revenue would be the funding source rather than additional fees or tax increases. The tobacco business is Guam's most regulated and taxed industry and has been a tremendous source of revenue for the government. By increasing the already heavy financial and operational burdens on cigarette wholesalers, puts this source of revenue at risk, not to mention the livelihood of, this is something else you could leave out also, the livelihood of several hundreds of employees and their family, People have mortgages to pay, they got to put, we know that. We've known that since we were probably 3-4 years old, something like that.
Ever since.
Yeah, this is not a point of persuasion. Furthermore, the legislature should not give audit and enforcement powers to a private entity over other private entities, especially when it's unclear whether they are subject to the same accountability, conflict of interest, and transparency laws that government agency officials and employees are subject to. The Office of Attorney General is best suited, if properly funded, to carry on such duties. To recapitulate, if the legislature wants to further ensure that rev tax has the necessary resources for collection, it should consider allocating additional funding to rev tax from tobacco tax revenues as a fraction of what Public Law 25, Azure 35-129 proposes to otherwise give a private party. The acquisition and installation of equipment needed to fix, and this is important, to affix stamps on every cigarette package is a cost barrier which will require licensees to incur a substantial expense that Public Law 129 did not address. MedPAC estimates the cost to licensees to purchase, install, and operate just one stamping machine to comply with Public Law 129 to be in the $200,000 to $300,000 range. Additional operating costs would be approximately $100,000. The reduction of 0.4% of the denominated value of the tax stamp purchased will aid in the affixing of tax stamp and maintenance of tax stamp equipment necessary to perform the operation. We suggest that the amount of reduction be revived after several years and determine if operating and implementing costs should warrant an increase or decrease in that amount. And then they wind up by, again, talking about the extra 1% added to tax stamps. So I got to hand it to them. It's a pretty well-worded letter. And I'll say it's a whole lot more persuasive than Peto's criticism of Paris. And I have to say that I agree with what John Calvo put in this letter on behalf of MedPAC. I don't see why the other wholesalers, unless this is wholesaler versus wholesalers, you know, if the Calvos want it, it's got to be bad sort of a deal. But it seems to me that Mid-Pac's criticism are pretty well taken here. And Paris's criticism, well, this is $17 million that we're going to be paying out to what Tello says is going to be a corrupt bargain, because it's the beneficiary of that contract pretty well decided upon already. So I'm ready to reel, Jose. You got your gavel handy? Yeah. In the case of Pito versus Paris, I rule for Paris. Next case. There we go. Let's take a break after that. I deserve a break after all that heavy lifting.
Hoffaday, this is Congressman St. Nicholas. Your congressional office would like to remind you that pandemic unemployment assistance is set to expire on September 6th of this year. We encourage the people of Guam to seek out active employment as much as possible, as jobs continue to remain limited, and we want to prevent hardship for our people at the conclusion of the PUA program. Thank you, and see to us, Mahase.
This ad was paid for with official funds from the office of Congressman Michael F.Q. San Nicolas.
All dads should own a Traeger. And this Father's Day, you can win a Traeger smoker grill for your dad and feast on flavorful wood-fire crafted meals. Cooked with a flip of a switch. Cook low and slow or high and fast with digital precision on your Traeger pellet grill. Purchase $35 or more in fuel at 76 Circle K and enter to win. Gas up today and join Circle K's Father's Day package giveaway. A Traeger smoker grill, a canopy, a cooler full of meat, and 2 cases of Bud or Bud Light are up for grabs only at Circle K. Conditions apply. Visit 76CircleKGuam.com.
And now back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the one radio show politicians don't want you to listen to. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Yeah, I always like it when people use our Facebook post to ask a question for a friend. That's a good one. And we have a little bit of a sticky wicket here. Since Lou held her 1400 press conference to talk about incentives for getting vaccinated, the question now becomes, if you've already been vaccinated, can you enter the lottery? And here's the answer. Are you ready for this? The answer is, if you've already been vaccinated, no, you can't enter the lottery. But Tina has introduced a bill asking that all those shots that have already been administered be overruled, because they're probably products of the insular cases. Okay, remember the name of the show is Tall Tales, so I haven't been paying much, I don't gamble, so I haven't been paying much attention to this lottery. So apparently you can participate even if you've been vaccinated, right, Jose?
So it's a lottery, or it's a prize?
How was the prize awarded?
Oh, through a lottery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so everyone was entered that's been jabbed.
Okay.
Yeah.
They've been entered?
They've been entered. Now they've been entered twice.
Ah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So how are the drawings going to be performed?
That's a good question. I think the article said that there's been 500 entries, so maybe a big bingo basket. I don't know.
So you have to fill out something?
Yeah, I think you have to fill out something. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So be it. Okay, next I go on to Bavacqua versus the United States. And once again, it's necessary for me to do a little primer on critical race theory. Critical race theory, as we know it from the mainland, says that the United States was not founded in 1776 with the Declaration of Independence. It was founded in 1619 when the first slave was landed in Virginia, which isn't true. Yeah, I've talked about this on the show. In 1619, the first settlers landed, and they used a system called indentured servants. And the way it worked was if you wanted to leave England and come to the New World, you entered into an indenture, which is a form of contract. So you would promise to work for someone for a period of time at a certain wage, and he would pay your way to the New World. And in the beginning, white folks were indentured and some black folks were indentured. And it wasn't until over 100 years after the first black indentures arrived, and I should have hung on to this, that some judge, there was also a procedure for retrieving runaway indentures. Yeah. So it was a creative judge who determined that with respect to black folks, it wasn't necessary to end the indenture after the period of service was over. But this did not happen in 1619. But the so-called historian that developed this whole theory was even rebuked by the New York Times. Yeah, even the New York Times came out and said, well, you know, a lot of the stuff that is in this, it isn't exactly right.
Even we have standards.
Yeah, even the New York Times had standards. And her theory was that the reason that the Revolutionary War occurred was because the colonists wanted to keep their slaves, and they were afraid that the Brits would abolish slavery in the 13 colonies. Yeah.
So she has a DeLorean.
Yeah. And that was her theory. So she said the whole country, the country was founded on the institution of slavery. And it so corrupted the country that we have systemic racism. In other words, the racism was baked into the country at the very beginning. It's still there. It cannot be removed. We've just got to junk what we got and start all over again. So that's the basis for systemic racism. And then the elements are this. You find some historic person or episode or occurrence or whatever that lines up with your theory of racism. For instance, Thomas Jefferson, perhaps one of the greatest of all the founders. Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, two American heroes, were slaveholders. Therefore, they were no good. And the things that they did must be cast from our view. We shouldn't have kids studying the Declaration of Independence because it was written by a man who owned slaves. And we shouldn't celebrate Washington's birthday because he had slaves. And we shouldn't, and we must, if we can get away with it, tear down the statues for all of these people because they were slaveholders. And we must tear down the statues of Grant and Lincoln, who, if you wanted to credit a couple of guys with having a real role in the emancipation of slaves in the United States, it'd be those two guys. But those peddling critical race theory found that when Grant married, his wife owned a slave. Now, Grant saw to it that the slave was emancipated, you know, not the day they were married, but not long after. Lincoln never owned a slave, but Lincoln had some Native Americans executed during what we now refer to as the Indian Wars. And it went something like this. There was a fight between the cavalry and the Indians, and over 300 Indians were captured and sentenced to death. Lincoln commuted all of those death sentences, but maybe 35 of the worst offenders. Now, you're talking about people that killed women and children, you know, not really nice people. No, I could get canceled for saying that about a Native American, I know.
Does the Emancipation Proclamation get canceled too?
It should, yeah, right. Because, you know, so because of that, Lincoln is no longer a hero, so you should tear down the statues of Lincoln. So what you do if you embrace critical race theory, you find these old these events that are long ago past. You dig them up. You find out if they can fit into your dialogue on critical race theory, and then you engage in what's called presentism, which means you apply today's manners, morals, and ethics to what happened in 1860, in Lincoln's case, in 1863, in the middle of a civil war. That's critical race theory. Now, we do the same thing here. We've seen it over and over again. The top-rated separatist, Michael Bavacqua, constantly goes back into Guam history, finds an incident that fits into his idea of critical race theory, and that is that the United States never gives Chamorros an even break. Never did, never doesn't know, never will. And so so that Guam must separate from the United States. And a couple of days ago, I took something out of his column where he was quoting what a naval officer said about Guam in 1904.
Say it isn't so.
Yeah, so, you know, it wasn't the truth or falsity of the statement that he was commenting on. He didn't care because it could be read as derogatory about Chamorros. We don't do that nowadays. So you apply 2021 standards to what happened in 1904, allowing him to say, see, it's just like I said. This systemic anti-Chamorroism is built into what we never wanted the Organic Act. We never asked for the Organic Act. So, and that's how it all works. So here's his latest column. Political status, self-determination, decolonization, key for what's next. To be Chamorro in the unincorporated territory of Guam today means the following. That you are a U.S. citizen. You are part of the U.S. Now, is a Chamorro a part of the U.S.?
Maybe the Baja of California. I don't know.
A Chamorro is a person, right? Yeah. Being to be Chamorro in the unincorporated territory of Guam to me means the following. You are a U.S. citizen. You are a part of the U.S., but with an asterisk. Yeah, I see people walking down the street. I've always wondered what that was floating above their heads. Yeah. Your citizenship can be considered full if you live in the United States, but it can be limited as long as you are in Guam. Once again, just not true. If you are a United States citizen, you are a United States citizen wherever you go. If you are a United States citizen in Tijuana, and you find yourself in the Tijuana jail, if you remember the song, just send my mail to the Tijuana jail, Kingston Trio, the United States Consul will come and pay you a visit, even if you're Chamorro.
Even if you have an asterisk above your head.
Even if that asterisk is still above your head. If you are an American living in Australia, kind of on a permanent basis, and your passport is about to expire, even if you're Chamorro, if you go to the United States consulate, wherever, in whatever city you happen to be, they will issue you a new passport.
There, the asterisk is upside down.
Exactly. So, you know, I know exactly what he's driving at. But you shouldn't do that. You know, if you're going to make these claims, a certain amount of precision must be incorporated into what you say. It's just like Neil Weir. I wrote Neil Weir a nasty letter because he kept using this, people on Guam are second-class citizens. People on Guam are not second-class citizens. People on Guam don't vote. That doesn't make you a second-class citizen. If you are a convict in one of the states that does not open the polls to people who are convicts, felony convictions, that doesn't make you a second-class citizen. You are still a citizen. I don't want to equate being on Guam with being a convict, but I'm just saying that you need to be really precise about what you're saying. Then he goes on to say, you are represented by a single non-voting delegate to Congress. Okay, now this applies only to Chamorros. Now, I'm not Chamorro, so I'm not represented by a single non-voting delegate to Congress. I've got a member of the House of Representatives and 2 senators, because I'm not Chamorro. But if you're Chamorro, you're represented by a single non-voting delegate to Congress.
I was going to say, he's describing you right now.
Yeah.
And you're not Chamorro.
Yeah,
Your tongue is Chamorro.
Sa latsi jo, sa ane mafanago ne, ti fanago jo gi America. Fanago jo gi America, ti fanago jo gi Guam. Sa latsi tatlo, sa ti Chamorro in Naho, ti Chamorro itatatu. Pues ti Chamorro jo. Yeah, just, I'll never make those mistakes again, I'll tell you that. All right. You have no electoral college votes, and you do not get to vote in presidential elections, if you're Chamorro. If you're not Chamorro.
And Bob Klitzkie.
Yeah. Yeah, despite the lack of representation, all federal laws can apply to you, except the Internal Revenue Code. Yeah, and except the customs laws of the United States. You do not have to pay federal income taxes like those living in the States or the District of Columbia, but federal funding is also significantly reduced compared to those in the 50 states. Wrong again. Guam gets the bulk of the federal programs available. The only 2 that I'm aware of that are different are SSI and the higher matching requirements for Medicaid. But food stamps and Section 8 and all the rest of the stuff, all of the federal grants, which is pretty good for a jurisdiction that doesn't pay into the U.S. Treasury. All right, let me take a short break here.
Celebrate Dad this Father's Day. Mezcla Bistro in Nagana is always happy to serve you and the family. We offer your local favorites to include herb-roasted prime rib and honey-glazed ham. Treat Dad to our special Sunday brunch buffet to enjoy free-flowing draft beer and sing along with Didi Uehara. Sunday, June 20th from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. and 12:30 p.m. to 2:30 p.m. Seating is limited, so call us at 479-2652 or 2653 to make your RSVP. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro, a true taste of Guam.
Half a day, this is Honey. Here at APL, our expertise and extensive network can help you grow your business and reach out to more global markets. As a responsible carrier, APL is also committed to a sustainable future, whether it's protecting the environment or investing our efforts in giving back to the community. Our dedicated teams in Guam, Saipan, and on U.S. mainland are here to support you. Call 588-4651 or visit apl.com.
So going on here, I got another Mark on the phone. I'll get to you as soon as I finish with Bavacqua here, another Mark. And if I don't make it before the big halftime show, he'll be right away, right on the floor after the show. Okay, he goes on to say, the Constitution may apply to you, but only via the Organic Act. Well, the Organic Act applies the Bill of Rights to people living on the island of Guam. It doesn't apply the Internal Revenue. It doesn't apply the Uniformity Clause, and that's why we have what we have. Guam and those who reside there fall under the territorial clause. Now, I don't fall under the territorial clause, which grants plenary authority over the rights and rules in any U.S. territory. Well, he got that one pretty close to right, but even a broken clock tells the correct time twice a day. Then he goes on with another big one. Within the labyrinth of the U.S. government, you are overseen by the Department of Interior, which also oversees Native American tribes, parks, and endangered species. No, the Department of Interior is, in a sense, our lobby in the Capitol. No person in the Department of Interior, including the Secretary of the Interior, is part of our chain of command. Nobody in the Department of Interior can tell us to do or not to do anything. But the Department of Interior maintains several federal programs, federal grants, etc., and ordinarily can be accounted on lobbying on our behalf before the Congress. Well, so many of your people, if you are Chamorro, proudly served in the U.S. military for generations, fighting and dying in American wars since World War I, the benefits for those veterans are often limited or denied because of where they live. Limited, yes. Denied, no. There are no special rules for Chamorros or people living on Guam.
That goes for those living smack dab in the middle of Wyoming.
It does, yeah. Or Alaska.
Yeah.
If you're living in Nome, Alaska, not much of a VA there. Yeah, so it's not an ideal situation. It's one that I don't like, one that I would lift my voice to urge the Veterans Administration to establish a greater presence here. But it's not because you're Chamorro. All right. If you are Chamorro, you have likely developed a sense of patriotism of the U.S. primarily for its role in liberating the island from the Japanese in World War II, and advanced because of the opportunities being an American territory have afforded. But you may also inherit a history of traumatic U.S. policies. Here we go, critical race theory, such as banning of Chamorro language in schools. Now, up until 1973, you would see signs in government offices that said English is the official language of Guam. Other language shall not be used except for official interpreting purposes. Yeah, this was 23 years into the territory of Guam, after the end of the naval government. We don't want to talk about that. And the displacement of thousands of Chamorros from their lands after the war. Well, you know, this, of course, is a never-ending source of argument. And I know that people won't like the sound of it, but when the United States takes land by eminent domain, it must provide the landholder with just compensation. And the measure of just compensation is not related to how much you didn't want your land to be condemned. It's one of the unfortunate incidents, but it's something that all sovereigns do. All sovereigns have the ability to take private land for public purposes, which is what happened here. Was just compensation paid? I hope so, because the U.S. government paid for the land twice and then gave an awful lot of it back. Now, Bavacqua doesn't want to talk about that. All right. Despite being a territory of the U.S. since 1898, you still have to regularly deal with U.S. leaders knowing what Guam is or where it is, and that what your average American knows about Guam is probably from jokes of late-night comedians. Yeah, like John Oliver and his straight man, and Paris Hattori. Yeah, who really didn't know much of anything. Okay. You come from a place that is called everything from where America's day begins, the tip of America's spear, America in Asia, the land of the Chamorro. On some days, all of these ways of seeing your place in the world can coexist. Sometimes they seem ill-fitting and may contradict. You also hold a right to self-determination. Now, no one has ever really been able to explain to me where this right of self-determination comes from, unless you want to pick up one of my cards and talk in terms of natural rights. But then you kind of got a problem with your pro-abortion stance for Chamorros there, Michael Bavacqua. You hold a right to self-determination, and of course the references to the United Nations, a culture and language and place in the world. Nobody's saying you don't, but this is often under attack or ignored locally or by the U.S. government, such as when, this right means that your place in the world and in relation to the U.S. has not been determined. Well, according to the Treaty of Paris, it has been determined. Treaty of Paris, which is what brought Guam into the American system, said that the Congress should determine the civil rights and political status of the people in the island. And that was determined. So the people of Guam are United States citizens living in the territory of Guam. Guam has been in marginal territorial statuses for more than 3 centuries. The last 120 years continuing under the U.S. Issues such as political status, self-determination, and decolonization are important in discussing what might come next for you and your island. Well, why don't we discuss them then? You know, nobody wants to talk about decolonization, including Bavacqua. He only wants to talk about self-determination, which for him means independence. All right, another mark I'll get to you just as soon as we're done with the halftime show. I'm finished with Bavacqua.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Was a coronavirus investigation blocked? I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. Vanity Fair magazine, in a 12,000-word report, says the State Department was warned against pursuing an investigation into the origins of the coronavirus.
The key phrase in the report is 5 words, quote, smelled like a cover-up. That statement was made by Thomas Donano, a former acting assistant secretary at the State Department, who said his office was warned not to probe the origins of the virus because it risked opening up a, quote, can of worms. Others called it a Pandora's box, and the fear was that digging into the Wuhan lab leak theory could bring attention to the U.S. helping to fund gain-of-function research at the Wuhan lab. And multiple former State Department officials told Fox News there was an effort to oppose an extensive investigation into a possible lab leak.
Fox's Trace Gallagher reports the State Department says no effort was ever made to withhold information. But former CDC Director Dr. Robert Redfield told the magazine that when he publicly supported the possibility of a lab leak, his life was threatened by, among others, prominent scientists. South Carolina Republican Senator Lindsey Graham telling Fox's Hannity,
we need somebody outside the science world to get to the bottom of this, and I think this is a job for Congress.
That's the same phrase President Biden used in a statement yesterday, saying he would not create a presidential commission to study the January 6th riot at the U.S. Capitol. Former Vice President Mike Pence told a political dinner in New Hampshire last night he and former President Trump have spoken many times since leaving office, including about January 6th.
And I don't know if we'll ever see eye to eye on that day.
But Mr. Pence said he will always be proud of what they accomplished together. More infrastructure talks scheduled at the White House today between the president and the GOP's lead negotiator, West Virginia's Senator Shelley Moore Capito. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki saying
he's looking forward to seeing what the other side has to offer.
America is listening to Fox News.
Do you dread waiting in those long, inconvenient lines? That's why you won't find them at Bank Pacific. We're back to our pre-COVID Monday to Saturday hours with all of our branches open. You know, that where others put branches, we place roots thing. And if you don't want to come to the bank, we have MyCloud Banking through which you can go to the bank on any of your devices, including through our new cool mobile banking platform with remote capture so you can deposit checks from anywhere. Offline, online, no line. Bank Pacific. Where others put branches, we place roots and rooting for you. Member FDIC.
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
There is progress reported in talks that could lead to the U.S. rejoining the Iran nuclear deal.
State Department spokesman Ned Price says the 5th round of indirect talks with Iran in Vienna has ended, but a 6th round and more are likely. Price said talks so far have crystallized what steps would be needed for mutual compliance in a deal that tries to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. And on the U.S. end, that would mean a lifting of sanctions.
There have been discussions about sanctions that may be inconsistent with the 2015 nuclear deal, sanctions that have been imposed subsequent to the last administration's abandonment of the JCPOA.
But Price also said questions remain as to whether there is a seriousness of purpose to resume compliance with the deal. Jessica Rosenthal, Fox News.
Firefighters have finally extinguished a huge fire in an oil refinery near Tehran. Iran is now blaming it on Israel. The federal government says it is elevating cybersecurity incursions, including ransomware attacks on U.S. infrastructure, to the same level as terrorism, as the White House considers sanctioning Russia for not doing enough to stop hacking groups in that country.
President Biden says he's closely looking at possibly retaliating against Russia for these recent ransomware attacks, but the White House says it is up to the private sector to protect themselves.
Can't do it alone. Business leaders have a responsibility to strengthen their cyber defenses to protect the American public and our economy.
But the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Senior Vice President for Cyber tells me the status quo isn't working. There does need to be consequences and a credible deterrent from the federal government to hackers.
Fox's Hillary Vaughn, the head of the International Chemical Weapons Watchdog Group, says its experts have investigated 77 allegations against Syria and determined that in 17 cases, chemical weapons were likely or definitely used. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
An easily overlooked part of covering our home is what's inside of it. Over time, we buy things we don't want to lose, but don't update our contents coverage. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Hafaday, this is Congressman Nicholas. Your congressional office would like to remind you that pandemic unemployment assistance is set to expire on September 6th of this year. We encourage the people of Guam to seek out active employment as much as possible, as jobs continue to remain limited, and we want to prevent hardship for our people at the conclusion of the PUA program. Thank you, and see to us, Mahase.
This ad was paid for with official funds from the office of Congressman Michael F.Q. San Nicolas.
Busy week? Mezcla Bistro in Tumon has you covered. Let us take the worries out of your dinner meal planning. Check out our daily specials or enjoy some of your local favorites. Plus, receive a free kids meal with each adult dinner entree purchased Monday through Thursday. Call 969-2652 for more information or to make a reservation at the Grand Plaza Hotel in Tumon. And don't forget, Jack Larimer is live every Saturday night. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro, a true taste of Guam.
So there we are, back again, Tall Tales, after that big halftime show that we have every day at 1700. And I've got another Mark on the line here. We've had really good luck with our Marks, haven't we, Jose? Yeah. So yeah, let's hear from another Mark. Good afternoon, another Mark.
Hey, Bob, how you doing today?
Doing great.
I got a question. Does Bavacqua have any letters behind his name?
Yeah, I think he's a PhD, isn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, do you ever notice that some people with letters behind their name lose their intellect when they get those letters?
I've heard of such things, yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, because how you broke down Bavacqua's statements is actually true, and I'm not saying this because I've got a letter behind my name. I'm saying this is because I actually paid attention in school.
That'll do it.
Everything you brought up is part of our history. When I say our history, I'm talking modern history. I'm not talking about this 1619 crap. But it seems to me that Bavacqua doesn't want to hear or read facts because they're not his facts. Just like that, the guy that's fighting for citizenship, or what do you call that in the States, when he claims that everyone in the island wants it, when not everybody in the island knows about it.
Yeah, that's Neil Weir. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So he doesn't want to listen or read or understand the facts that are presented because they're not his facts. Okay, so you've debunked everything damn near that he said. And this is stuff that I learned in school, which means I don't know where the heck he learned his stuff from. And I hope to God it's not the same school that lady wrote the 1619 Critical Race Theory book. I tried to read that book. I'm serious. I wanted to see what makes it so interesting.
Uh-huh.
I couldn't get out of the first chapter before I deleted it.
Yeah, understood.
Because, yeah, in using her thinking, her frame of mind, or the current critical race theory mantra that's out there, okay, in using that now, not back when it was being done, then to be honest with you, there should be no nation in existence. Because every nation dating back to the dawn of time has violated what was mentioned as critical in the critical race theory thinking. Every nation, not just individuals, but nations. The British are guilty of it. The Italians, Chinese, Egyptians, everybody. So why all of a sudden they're stating that the U.S. did not become the U.S. in 1776, but in 1619? Okay, what about 1522, 1523, 1524? When in your conversation, that's when the indentured servants were first brought on. Why does it have to be a specific race? I mean, in the United States, during its buildup, they've had Chinese slaves for the railroad, Irish slaves that were brought in because of the potato famine. But yet to this day, this is 2021, I have not met a slave. And I met an old man back about 20 years ago. I met an old man who was 103 years old, a black man, whose father was a slave, but he wasn't. So to use critical race theory as a supposed starting point, I mean, that's trying to tell me that the climate isn't changing when yesterday is not as hot as it is today. That tells me that's a climate change. But that's nature doing the change, not man. So when Vavakwa keeps coming up with these accusations, this and that, it's listening to him. It's like listening to someone trying to make a presentation to the United Nations, the most anti-Semitic, racist agency I've ever read about.
You got it right, Mark.
Yeah, and for him to actually sit there and make claims with no actual facts behind it, because he's relying on his facts, is to me a waste of the education that he paid to get. Because it's only one-sided. You're not looking at the full book, mister. You got to look at the whole history, not just the parts that you like.
Well,
Because if that's the case,
I'll tell you what, Mark, you and I will keep an eye on him, and when necessary, set the record straight, right?
Oh, yeah. It's the louder a person shouts, in their minds, the more they're being heard. The only problem is what they're yelling. If it makes them look like an idiot, it doesn't matter to them.
True enough.
Because they're yelling.
Yeah, well, I want to thank you for your help with my yelling today, Mark. Thanks a lot for calling.
All right. Hey, Bob, you have a good weekend.
You too. So long. Yeah, so there's one other thing here. You know, if I were going to embellish on this a little bit, this is how it would start. To be a Chamorro in the unincorporated territory of Guam today means you will not have electric lights in your house. You will be reading everything that I read by gaslight. That's all we got here. Straight gaslighting. Yeah. Thanks a lot for calling another, Mark. I can't, I have to do this all by myself most of the time. I appreciate all the help I can get. Okay, next on the card, we got two transparency items on the card coming up. First of all is we've got the Daily Post versus Tony Diaz. And if you've never heard of Tony Diaz, he's a director of communications for the Archdiocese of Agana. And here's the story. Petition launched for FD principal, FD, Father Duenas principal, to keep his job. Parents and some of the alumni of Father Duenas Memorial School are hoping to convince the Archdiocese of Agana to renew the FD principal's contract. Ishmael, quote, Temo Paris, Temo, I haven't heard that nickname before. Contract as principal is up for renewal this summer, but concerns that the Archdiocese may have someone else in mind instead of renewing Paris's contract prompted the FD community to start a petition in support of keeping the principal for another term. Quote, Principal Ismael Telmo Paris has been a fixture at Father Duenas Memorial School for years. He has supported the growth of the school and its students, and he has garnered the respect of FD alumni across all classes. He has facilitated the educational and spiritual growth of thousands of young men, and he has supported the development of the school into what it is today, according to the petition on change.org. The Guam Daily Post reached out to the Archdiocese for comment, and spokesperson Tony Diaz said, are you ready for this? Fasten your seatbelts. The spokesperson, Tony Diaz from the Archdiocese, said, the Archdiocese does not discuss personnel issues. No! You know, I almost fell off my stool when I read that line. So here is a little, Tony Diaz, if you're listening, here's a little bit of advice. You've made the post here. The Archdiocese has made the post. And there's stuff posted on Jungle Watch about this very controversy. And these are signs that the bishop must weigh in and say something. Hiding behind this personnel matters rubric does not serve him well, does not serve you well, does not serve the Archdiocese well, doesn't serve Father Duenas High School well. It's just not the way of doing things. And it's dangerous. I think it was George Santayana who said, those who do not remember the lessons of history are doomed to repeat them. We had a bishop before this one that didn't pay any attention to what was going on in his archdiocese, wouldn't communicate with his parishioners. He's not a bishop anymore. It's just not the way to roll. So if people are talking about this, then someone from the Archdiocese needs to talk about it. If not the bishop, then his spokesman needs to speak up. Now, if you read the stuff on Jungle Watch, and Jungle Watch is exactly that. I have posted a lot of stuff on Jungle Watch myself, and Jungle Watch is not a newspaper. It's not journalism. It's no question about it. It is, in fact, opinion, and it has never purported to be anything other than opinion. But what the Jungle Watch take on this controversy is not good at all. So if you have everyone talking about you and you are silent and you come up with a BS excuse like the Archdiocese does not discuss personnel issues, what you're doing is you're arming your opponent, Tony, because your opponent, whoever that is going to say, it's just like I said. They're doing it, they're doing the wrong thing, and they're hiding. What are they afraid of? Why don't they come out and tell us what's going on? Why don't they come out and tell us their position? It's just like we said. They don't communicate. It's just not the way to do things. So a little lack of transparency. You'd think we're dealing with the government of Guam with this, we don't talk about personnel issues. All right, so I've got Dr. Ron McNinch ready to weigh in on this one. Good afternoon at the Georgia Peach, our own version of Ty Cobb. How you doing, Ron?
Very good. You know, Ty Cobb was, he was really smart because he was one of the early baseball players who saved his money, invested it, and actually led a pretty good life after his playing for as long as he did. So yeah. But real quick, on the Archdiocese first. When your public information officer hides behind that personnel matters excuse, it's just a kick me sign to his organization. That's all it is. And,
exactly.
And you're absolutely right. It's just like, it just says, basically it raises everybody's eyebrows like, hey, there's smoke, so there must be fire now. And so it just is not the best way to answer the question. But anyway, that's what I thought of when I heard your Archdiocese point. But I really called in to talk about the political status, shenanigans, and stuff like that. And if I may just mention just a few quick points. If Guam really wants to improve itself vis-a-vis the federal government, there's a standard formula that U.S. territories have followed to do that. It's not a very hard formula. It's just there are a set of steps that the people and the governor and the legislature can do to really make progress and to really get a better deal, so to speak. And one of the first things Guam should do is simply ask the president to appoint a special representative to improve our federal matters. That's the first step. It doesn't take a political status vote. It doesn't take anything else. And so what happens is the special representative then, and by the way, I don't think Guam has really asked for it. I think the closest thing to a special representative that was appointed was a task force called BATFOG back in the late 80s, the Bush administration task force on Guam. But a special representative is basically a person with almost an ambassadorial level rank, and they're appointed to work on how to improve the federal relationship. And we've never done that. And I don't know why. I think it's because people don't want any improvements.
I'll tell you why, Rod. Because the loudest voices, the money from the Guam Treasury, and all of our efforts, when I say our, I'm not using the correct pronoun, but pronouns used to be the easiest part of the language, now they're the hardest. But anyhow, the money and the voice, et cetera, is not about improving Guam's political status. It goes back to Bavakwa, and if you are a Chamorro living in the unincorporated territory of Guam. So it's about Chamorro self-determination. It's not about Guam's political status. Big difference.
Well, there is one other point related to self-determination. I don't know why people simply don't read the history. And after World War II, 1947, the Guam Congress was established. One of the first things the Guam Congress did, which was all Chamorro, is they asked the federal government for a Guam Organic Act, and they asked the federal government for U.S. citizenship. And so for 2 years, the Congress considered it. They had a bill up. There was a first Organic Act. Most people have never read the first draft of the Organic Act. They had a bicameral legislature. It had all kinds of neat things we never got in the final Organic Act. And so it went up, it languished, and then after frustration with the governor, of course, there was the walkout. And before they walked out, they resubmitted the request for citizenship and the request for an Organic Act. That came from an all-Chamorro Congress in the Guam Congress. And to me, that probably should have removed us from the decolonization list, because that was the act. You know, we had a representative government that was respected, and it was embraced. There's one other quick thing you mentioned about language and the Chamorro language and things like that not being allowed to be spoken. In the Guam Organic Act, if you read the Bill of Rights, we have a really interesting and special protection, and that's the language. If you look at it, you cannot discriminate against the person on Guam because of language, which is very unique. And I think it was just simply reflective that the federal government realized that there was this tension over language originally, and that was one of the remedies to that. It was kind of interesting. But in general, I think that in 1947 and again in 1949, there was a specific request to the federal government to give an Organic Act and to give citizenship. At that point, once we have an Organic Act, and particularly after we had made the significant moves to have a governor, we have a delegate to Congress, and by the way, the first Organic Act had a resident commissioner provision, and that's a kind of a neat alternative to a delegate. We've been given all of the tools necessary to do anything we want. We just don't exercise them. I call this the ruby slippers problem. That is, Dorothy was in the land of Oz with a cowardly lion, a scarecrow, and a tin man, going nowhere on a road to nowhere, the yellow brick road, when she had the power the whole time to get exactly what she wanted. The problem is, what the people of Guam want isn't what the radicals want, and they tend to be the loudest.
That's absolutely correct, Ron. And, you know, going back to what actually happened in 1948 and 1949, 1950, critical race theory will require that those people be discredited sooner or later, that any statue of Carlos Taitano will have to be torn down and taken up and mounted on the top of Mount Trashmore in Ordot, because that's the way it works. You know, the fact that actually we have the United States did pay attention to what it was that people want, that couldn't have possibly been self-determination for Chamorros. So we have to define self-determination in such a manner that that doesn't count. If we're going to be, continue on with critical race theory and forget about political status. But thanks for chiming in, Ron. And unlike the other Ty Cobb, you don't come flying into second base with your spikes up in the air, hoping to catch the second baseman's by the seat of the pants as you slide into base.
Thank you so much, sir.
All right. Ron McNinch. Okay, next I've got Kaz Endo, who wants to talk about a member of my family. And, nepotism is something you got to watch out for every time. But I do have this rule. Nepotism's okay so long as you keep it in the family. And then after that, I've got Frenchie, who wants to talk about Dr. Maggette and critical race theory. So let's go to Kaz Endo first. Good afternoon, Kaz. Oops. Good afternoon, Kaz.
Yeah, hey, a couple of things to update you on. You were talking about, somebody was talking about climate change. I was playing golf today for a charity event. It was pretty hot. I wish somebody would have turned down the temperature, but nobody was able to do it. So we were burning out there. I wanted to tell your listeners that Pat is doing well, and of course he's your nephew, and you probably know, but your audience maybe not so much. And I'm headed out to Los Angeles next week to meet up with him, and then we'll bring him home. So wanted to let everybody know that he's doing well, and he'll be headed home.
Hey, that's really good news. That's really good news, guys. And I want to thank you for taking such an interest in this and keeping us informed here in our international radio listening audience.
Yeah, no problem. And I know you love baseball because I hear it all in the show. And so I thought you might get a kick out of this. Dodger Stadium's opening up for full capacity. So as a surprise, I'm taking them to go watch the Dodgers against the Texas Rangers.
You're going all the way to Brooklyn, Kaz?
Yeah, I wish, but no. Yeah, we're gonna take them down to the Pasadena version of Dodgers.
I still have not approved the relocation of the Dodgers and Giants to the West Coast. I'm kind of conservative on those.
Well, I'll take it up with management when I'm there. I'm sure they'll want to hear more about it. He's doing well, and he'll have some radiation treatment here when he gets back. But the nurses that treated him over at USC Hospital, they call it Keck over there. Renamed it Keck, but USC Hospital people will be more familiar with that. He played a little piano for them on his way out as a sign of thank you. But they were pretty floored with his playing, that they actually asked him back for Nurses Day or Nurses Month recognition, and he did a 45-minute little performance for all the nurses that took care of him. So, I know that sometimes people talk about ambassadors and so forth, but Pat is a great ambassador for our island and our hospitality. And even when he's the one that's the patient, he's willing to come out and treat everybody to his talent. So I thought that I'd share some good news on this Friday with you guys.
Okay, well, I appreciate that, Kaz. Thanks a lot for calling.
Okay, I'll catch up with you when I get back. Take care.
All righty. Okay, so let's break for the seventh inning stretch, and then I guess we'll go to Montreal, where baseball players used to speak French before they moved out of Montreal.
The Montreal exposés.
Exactly.
All dads should own a Traeger. And this Father's Day, you can win a Traeger smoker grill for your dad and feast on flavorful wood-fire crafted meals. Cooked with a flip of a switch. Cook low and slow or high and fast with digital precision revision on your Traeger pellet grill. Purchase $35 or more in fuel at 76 Circle K and enter to win. Gas up today and join Circle K's Father's Day package giveaway. A Traeger smoker grill, a canopy, a cooler full of meat, and 2 cases of Bud or Bud Light are up for grabs only at Circle K. Conditions apply. Visit 76CircleKGuam.com.
Celebrate Dad this Father's Day. Mezcla Bistro in Hagana is always happy to serve you and the family. We offer your local favorites to include herb roasted prime rib and honey glazed ham. Treat Dad to our special Sunday brunch buffet to enjoy free-flowing draft beer and sing along with Didi Uehara. Sunday, June 20th from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. and 12:30 p.m. to 2:30 p.m. Seating is limited, so call us at 479-2652 or 2653 to make your RSVP. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro, a true taste of Guam.
Okay, so here we are in Wrigley Field, Chicago, the 7th inning stretch. I hope everybody out there in our international radio listening audience, all you tailgaters, stood up and took a good stretch during the 7th inning stretch. So here we are. I got an interesting post from Elwin Champaco Quitano, who says a lot of kind of scholarly things on the web, and I wish he would tell me where I could do some reading on some of the things that he talks about. And here's what he says today, commenting on what Ron McNinch said. Chamorro is not indigenous in terms of language or cultural practice. However, it is very much defined as an evolved and organized group that lived through a Hispanic cultural lens for over 300 years. And then he says the RU, R-U, are founding indigenous people. And I've seen him use this before, that there was a pre-Hispanic group on the island called the RU. The only place I've ever seen it is in Elwin's post. I'd really like to know more about it, Elwin, if you could enlighten me sometime. You could always talk to Jose, and he'll give you my email address, or however you want to communicate. But I'd really like to know a lot more about that than I do, which is almost nothing right now. Okay, so we moved to the Archdiocese, and now we're going to move back to Bavacqua versus USA, because we've got Frenchie on the line who wants to talk about Bavacqua and about critical race theory. So go for it, Frenchie.
Good afternoon, Bob. It's good to hear about your nephew coming back on the island.
Yeah, absolutely.
It just dawned on me that 28 years ago, he came at my house in California and played for my 40th birthday.
Wow.
That sounds typical of him doing that kind of things, you know.
That's Patrick, yeah.
That's Patrick. He'll communicate through his music. So yeah, but to come back to Bavacqua and his hilks, Bavacqua, basically what he's doing the last few years is basically what in Marxist theory is called revisionism. He is revising history. He's picking and choosing little items and revise their meaning and revise their intention. And this is, revisionism was very big during the Cultural Revolution in China. Every time they were arresting a scholar or somebody that was pushing classical history or whatever, they were accusing them of revisionism, which of course is exactly what the little red guards were doing. And so now we have a big, fat, hairy red guard grown on Guam who is doing revisionism. So it's interesting to watch. And, you know, Ron McNinch just likes history, and he was talking about something that was very true, but unfortunately, it doesn't matter to people like Bevacqua because they just want to revise. And I think this was the point you made. As long as it doesn't fit their theory, then they want to erase whatever history there was about that. So it's quite interesting. And your gentleman that speaks on Chamorro issues is actually right. And then if you look at Chamorro is basically a Spanish version of Creole, you know. It's a mix of whatever the original language was with Spanish. It's a lot like Tagalog. It has evolved. It's not the original language which no longer exists. It's a language that has evolved, and it's a mix of several languages, of Tagalog, of Spanish, and whatever is left of the root culture. So it's quite interesting.
Okay, Frenchie. Did you want to say anything about what's going on at Father D?
Oh, at Father D, yeah.
And hang on a second. If you don't want to talk about what's going on there, all you have to do is say, I don't talk about personnel matters.
No! Actually, when I read the article this morning, I was in stitches. I said, well, Bob is going to have a good time with that one. I said, now we don't know the difference between Adelup and the Chancery. It's like they somehow have some people in common that decide what's going on in both Adelup and the Chancery.
I think you may perhaps be more prescient than you realize, Frenchie.
Yes,
You know,
yes. I was being facetious about that, but I'm very serious.
You could be the host of Tall Tales.
Well, I don't know if I can fill your very large shoes. Anyhow, it's very interesting. Actually, I was contacted a couple of weeks back by some of the parents. You know some of my neighbors. You've met them that have a son at Father Dueñas, and everybody was very concerned. A few weeks prior to that, there had been a very strange letter sent by the Chancery regarding audits of the finance of Father Dueñas, and it was obvious that something was going on. So I sent some feelers out there among the people that have been very helpful over the years in letting us know what's going on. And it's very interesting. It looks like some people at the Chancery that are, in the financial office and at the basically Father Richards, who holds now the title of special assistant to the Archbishop, which was his first title, but he is now also the apostolic vicar. Father Jeff has disappeared, and he's also the chancellor, who is the keeper of records, right, in the Catholic Church. So he has all those powers right now, and he's basically deciding everything that's going on. It sounded like those people were not very happy about Mr. Perez, even though, like most principals of all the schools, the Catholic schools around the island, and most parish pastors, they have been cooperating with the Chancery, trying to find the best way to move along this very difficult Chapter 11 reorg, and for many reasons I don't have to talk about. And it sounded like somebody wanted to get rid of Tommy, and that's exactly what the information that we had showed up. And a lot of the people that were involved in this got basically thrown under the bus. To make a long story short, it looks like they finally reached to the principal, and they're gonna renew his contract after some contentious renegotiations and clarification. But the parents, but also the alumni, were up in arms. The alumni are quite unhappy about the whole financial situation, and they're seeking maybe of reorganizing themselves as far as the school administration is, and it's tied to the archdiocese. So there are a lot more stories following this one. It looks like Mr. Perez is going to be keeping his job this summer, and I think the parents will be happy about that. What's disturbing is the lack of communication from the Chancery, but we'll see. It sounds like you have a small group of people that have kind of closed all the doors, access to and from the Archbishop, who is becoming more and more isolated, and that is not a good sign. I told you last time I saw the Archbishop, he was not in the best of moods, and I hear that this is becoming almost a daily thing. So I don't know what's going on, but there is a lot of dust being swept under that carpet. That's all what I can say right now.
Well, that's very interesting, Frenchie. So it looks like the principal's going to keep his job.
Yeah, it looks like it. Mr. Malila, who is the brother-in-law of somebody we know quite well, actually, when he understood everything that was going on, he has not really resigned, because he really never accepted the job in the first place. Officially, he had not quit his actual job, so he basically took his name out of contention. And so it looks like Mr. Perez is definitely going to keep his job. But, until we see it written in stone, we will keep being cautious.
Well, here's my tentative ruling then. The winners are Paris. The winners are Paris, the people that back Paris. The losers are the Archdiocese with this silly, we don't talk about personnel matters in the middle of the middle of something, right?
Yeah, and then 2 days ago there was a big article in the Post regarding the reorg, and apparently Judge what's her name, Tygenko Getwood, kind of slapped some of the lawyers representing the Archdiocese for not following proper procedures, because of course in reorg you have to be very open, and you cannot go and make backroom deals with the people trying to reorganize. And it sounds like the judge is not very happy with the Archdiocese either regarding those things.
Well, here's a short lesson on bankruptcy if you get out your Law and Order notebooks. When you have a Chapter 11 bankruptcy, or even a Chapter 7, the first thing that the trustee does is marshal the assets of the bankrupt into what's called the bankruptcy estate. And any future income that the bankrupt achieves goes into the bankruptcy estate. And no money gets paid out of the bankruptcy estate except as approved by the judge.
Yeah.
And that article was about people being, lawyers being paid out of the bankruptcy estate without court approval. And it's just something you don't want to do in a bankruptcy, is anger the judge, and that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, and I think this story with Dueñas apparently got the Archdiocese lawyers not very pleased either with the Chancery, because they have argued for bifurcations where some of the assets, like the parishes and the schools, are not put in the reorgs, because according to them they are separate entities from the rest of the Archdiocese. And then now they just gave ammunition to the creditors for exactly the opposite. So we'll see how that develops. But looking from what the judge will decide in that bankruptcy thing will be very revealing of what's going on.
True enough, Francie. Well, thanks again for helping me out with these two topics. This Bavacqua thing, you know, it's a constant effort on my part because his total proclivity for gaslighting on what I think are some really important issues. And I keep going back to my friend Robert Lynn. The lie you've heard 1,000 times is easier to believe than the truth you've heard just once. So.
Yeah, and it's the same type of thing that throw as much mud onto the wall and see what sticks.
Exactly.
It's basically those kind of tactics who are Marxist tactics, and they have proven to be very efficient. And if we don't counter them, they basically get away with murder. So enjoy your weekend, and I'm glad Patrick will be back soon, and we can pray for him and his safe return.
Absolutely. Thanks again, Frenchie. Talk to you later. All right, so we know a little bit more about Father Duenas than we knew before. Let's head for Churchill Downs, home stretch at the end of this week.
Need to finish the job or start one the right way? Get the right stuff at East West Rental Center. You can switch to easy mode using industrial strength equipment. With years of experience helping builders, East West Rental gives you exactly what you need. Tools for landscaping, concrete, lifts, trucks, tables, tents, chairs, water blasters, excavators, forklifts, air compressors, and more. Call East West Rental Center at 646-1463 or visit them in Upper Tumont. Open Monday to Saturday from 7 to 5, Sundays 8 to 5.
Hey! Big news! Now you can listen to The Point on radio.com. And radio.com gives you so much more. Local news stations give you what's going on in your community. Get national news from CBS, CNN, or Fox News Radio. Take a break with one of the hundreds of music, sports, and talk stations. Love podcasts? Radio.com has thousands of true crime, comedy, kids and family podcasts, and more. Listen anytime, anywhere. On your PC, smart speakers, and a variety of connected devices. Or download the radio.com app now from the App Store or Google Play.
Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky. Here we are heading down the home stretch, drat, at the end of the week. That means I've got about 12 more minutes of Tall Tales, and then I lapse into sort of an altered state for 70 straight hours. No tailgaters, no Tall Tales, no Second Amendment, no Jose. So my whole world goes on hold for that whole weekend. But have no fear, I'll be back at 4 o'clock on Monday, big as life and twice as ugly. All right, next item on the card, CLTC versus transparency. This is an article that ran a couple days ago in the Post. Land Trust to reassess priorities after Haddock's exit. Now remember, this is about transparency. And you all remember Jack Haddock, the Haddock incident. But let me get into this article here. 4 out of 8 priorities were reported accomplished by former Chamorro Land Trust Commission Administrative Director Jack Haddock III before he left the agency, according to Chairman John Regis Jr. Haddock was assigned a list of priorities in 2019 when he started with the agency, which included improving transparency at the CLTC and generating revenue. Well, if you're talking about improving something, you figure out, where do we start here? And if the action causes a change in where you started for the better, then you've improved, right? So if you start out with a window that's completely covered with soap. You know, some kids came in and soaped up the window, and you can't see anything through the window. That means no transparency. So if Hattick, you know, carrying the analogy a little farther, would have come in with some cleaning equipment and cleaned off the soap so we could see through the window, we'd say that he's improved the transparency at the CLTC. But when I finish reading this article, you'll conclude with me that rather than doing that, Hattick and the commission, the Chamorro Land Trust Commission, just went out and bought a bigger bar of soap and soaped that window a little bit more. 4 out of 8 priorities were reported, etc., before he left the agency. Hattick was assigned a list of priorities when he started with the agency, which included improving transparency at the CLTC and generating revenue. Regis didn't specify which priorities Hattick deemed accomplished and which tasks were unfinished, all in the name of transparency. You see what I mean? Yeah. So the reporter said, well, tell us which priorities did he accomplish? Which of the 4 did he accomplish? Well, I can't really talk about that because it's a personnel matter. No! I've been working with Tony Diaz on how to handle these questions, and that's my answer. Said the commission will be reassessing the priorities and plan to discuss the matter during their next meeting in June. Meanwhile, Adelup is vetting a permanent replacement for Hattick, notwithstanding the fact that the commission hires, okay? Angela Camacho is currently acting as the CLTC Administrative Director. Hattick left the CLTC in early May. The commission announced that he was not suited for the position in April. The commission chair then met with the governor about the decision. What took place during that meeting still hasn't been disclosed. Still hasn't been disclosed. When he started with the agency, Hattick had 8 goals when he started with the agency, which included improving transparency at the CLTC. Okay, now the conversation with the governor still hasn't been disclosed, all in the name of transparency. But Adelup confirmed Hattick's resignation soon thereafter. He now serves as a staff assistant to the governor. Hattick's last days at CLTC were wrapped in controversy. During a commission meeting in February, a land agent said Hattick coerced her into including an illegal land application swap in her report to the commission. Hattick stated he did not force her to make changes, but he added his own recommendations to the land agent report. Responding to the issue, CLTC chairman then interviewed staff and developed a report, which no one ever saw, which was not provided in the face of Sunshine Law requests. Interviewed staff and then developed a report which the commission discussed during a closed session in March, all in the name of transparency. No, if I were Jack Hattick, you know, I would get out my hypocrisy rubber stamp and go up to the Chamorro Land Trust Commission and say, let me see your papers here. I've got a stamp. You guys are such hypocrites. You talk about transparency, and you aren't transparent at all. Okay, they discussed the Regis report, which we haven't seen, during a closed session in March. Then came a closed meeting in April and subsequent announcement on Hattick's suitability. Commissioners also requested the update on his priorities directive during that meeting. As the situation at the CLTC unfolded, Joanne Brown called for an investigation into Hattick's actions stating that it appears that he committed forgery. She again brought up that concern in May and in a letter to the Speaker requested an oversight hearing on the CLTC. Quote, even with the resignation of Jack Haddock as the land administrator, what has not been addressed by the Commission is the issue of forgery and if other documents may have been forged by Mr. Haddock, Brown wrote to Speaker Therese Terlahi. In her response, Terlahi stated she expected a response from the CLTC regarding whether other cases were impacted by Haddock asking land agents to change recommendations or changing the reports himself. Now, of course, if the Chamorro Land Commission discovers any of these things, they're not going to tell anybody about it, all in the name of transparency. As to the alleged forgery, the Speaker forwarded Brown's letter to the Office of the Attorney General along with a request for an investigation. So, probably the most inadept agency on the island, Chamorro Land Trust Commission, absolutely no transparency. Nobody knows what they're doing, including themselves. All right. I got about 3 minutes to go here. I was going to start with Lebowski versus doctors, but maybe I'll just see what people are talking about on the Facebook comments here. I've got Henry Duenas, as you were Henry Mondlonia, all the way from Barstow, California. I got to tell you, I've been through Barstow a lot of times. Yeah. It's the junction of 10 and, let's see, Highway 10 and, it'll come to me in a minute. I-10 and, well, it's on the old US 66 road. I know the old roads better than the new roads.
Route 66.
Route 66. A good place to get your kicks.
That's what I heard.
Yeah. All right. So Pam Duvall was with us today, and Brad Wood and Roland Torres was here. Good afternoon, Viet Guam. And let's see, Dennis Benser. And he says, Real Joe, LOL, Real Joe Cruz, stop messing with Bob's phone. And that's exactly what was going on. Good call, Dennis. You know, my phone lets me know if I get an incoming message on what's it called?
I think that was from Signal.
Yeah, Signal.
Because he was messing with my phone, too.
I get an incoming call on Signal, and Real Joe Cruz is probably listening to the show and knew that when he sent me a message on Signal, he could hear it on the radio, and he just kept doing it over and over. The ever-popular Real Joe Cruz. Well, thanks for your help today, Real Joe Cruz and Dennis. We'll see you guys on Monday, 1600.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
The president says he won't order a probe. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News, rejecting a presidential commission to study the January 6th riot at the Capitol building.
White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki says the president firmly agrees with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi that Congress has a unique role and ability to carry out an investigation and must do so. Pelosi has also dismissed the idea of a presidential commission, describing it to colleagues as unworkable. Democrats do have other options, including a House Select Committee, after Senate Republicans blocked legislation to establish an independent bipartisan commission modeled after the panel set up to investigate the 9/11 terror attacks.
Fox's Jared Halperin, former Vice President Mike Pence, says he and former President Trump may never completely see eye to eye on what happened that day in January.
January 6th was a dark day in the history of the United States Capitol. But thanks to the swift action of the Capitol Police and federal law enforcement, violence was quelled. The Capitol was secured.
Mr. Pence told a political dinner in New Hampshire last night he will always be proud of the work that he and Mr. Trump did together. President Biden has nearly doubled the list of Chinese companies whose shares are off limits to U.S. investors, issuing an executive order intended to solidify and strengthen the order issued last year by President Trump, banning investments in Chinese defense and surveillance technology firms. With a new coalition government poised to assume power in Israel, the State Department says nothing changes on the U.S. end.
Regardless of what government is in place, our stalwart support, our ironclad support for Israel will remain.
State Department spokesman Ned Price says the U.S. will also help to replenish the missiles used in Israel's Iron Dome defense system. Prime Minister Netanyahu has called the plot to oust him